So let's talk OSHA Guardrail requirements. I'm Julian, and this is Simplified Building. If you didn't know, OSHA is the federal organization that sets and monitors the standards for workplace health and safety. Guardrails are physical barriers that protect people from all sorts of things, like falling from height or even cutting in line. I'm not talking about the guardrails that you'd see on the highway, you know, like the one that Dom used to save Letty in Fast and the Furious. The guardrails I am talking about are the ones that you'd see on a rooftop, a loading dock, or in a park somewhere. In this video, we're going to cover when guardrail is needed, the dimensions required, as well as any load or design requirements. We'll talk about Toeboards, and for an extra added benefit, we'll talk about guardrail for stairs. So let's start with when guardrail is required, and this is pretty straightforward. If you've got a fall that's 4 feet or more above a lower level, then you're going to need to have guardrail. Now, there are some exceptions to this, like if you're in the construction industry, or if you're using scaffolding. And if you think that you're one of those exceptions, you can always check the links below to go to the OSHA code. However, 4 feet is a great baseline. One important exception I do want to bring up is dangerous equipment, like a chemical vat or electrical equipment. It doesn't matter how high the fall is, if you can fall into or onto dangerous equipment, you need to have a guardrail. So let's talk about dimensions, starting with height. The top rail of your guardrail needs to be 42 inches tall, plus or minus 3 inches. So if it's anywhere between 39 and 45 inches above the surface you're walking on, you're good. What you put between your top rail and your walking surface is where a little bit more nuance exists. OSHA says that you can use a horizontal rail if a wall doesn't exist that's 21 inches tall. That horizontal rail just needs to be halfway between the top rail and the surface. Typically that's 21 inches. Another option is to use vertical rails, which just need to be placed 19 inches apart. Another important rule is the 19-inch sphere rule. And basically what that is anywhere between the top of your guardrail and the walking surface, a 19-inch sphere should not be able to pass through. And that 19-inch sphere rule is just to protect people from slipping underneath the guardrail. I mean, unless you're Jackie Chan. And whatever you use for your guardrail, just make sure that your top rails and your mid rails are at least 1/4 inch in either thickness or diameter. And all of these dimensions need to work together. So your height, your 19-inch sphere rule, mid rails, and the thickness of the guardrail. So let's talk about load requirements. How much force a guardrail can take is super important. I mean, have you ever walked up to a guardrail and just moved it with your hand? That shouldn't happen. That's not good. We don't want that. So we need to make sure we comply with OSHA requirements, which are that your top rail needs to be able to withstand a force of 200 pounds in the outward and downward direction. And your mid rail is pretty similar, except for that's 150 pounds in the outward and downward direction. One question is, how do you know if the guardrail can do that? Well, the answer is engineering. And if you're not able to do that, then thankfully manufacturers often provide all the engineering required to be able to have a safe and compliant guardrail. There are 2 design requirements that you need to know about to protect people from the guardrail. Ironic, I know, but they are important, so here they are. The first one is that your guardrail needs to be smooth. And this is to prevent people from getting cut or any abrasions, as well as preventing their clothes from getting snagged. And I think about like old wooden splintered rails, you know, definitely don't want to get one of those splinters stuck in your hand. That does not feel good. And the second one is that your guardrail can't be a projection hazard. We want to avoid people walking into the guardrail and getting themselves hurt. It kind of defeats the purpose. So what you can do to avoid this is have the guardrail end at the post or end into the wall, or if it does have to go beyond the post, you can just have it wrap back around itself. All right, so let's talk about Toeboard. And this can get confusing because a lot of people think you always gotta have Toeboard, but that's not quite true. You only need Toeboard if something can fall onto a person or dangerous equipment. If that's not gonna happen, then you don't need to have Toeboard. However, if you do, here's what you need to know. Your Toeboard needs to be 3.5 inches tall. It can't have more than 1/4 inch of space between it and the surface you're on, and it needs to be able to withstand 50 pounds of force. So do stairs need guardrails? Yes. Yes, they do. However, they're called stair rail systems, which is just OSHA's fancy way of saying a guardrail designed for stairs. Stairs need to have a guardrail when there are 4 steps, and that includes the floor or platform you're stepping onto. A stair rail system needs to follow all the same standards that a guardrail does, like the 42-inch height, 200 pounds of force, and the 19-inch sphere rule. There is one exception. If your stair rail system was built before 2017, then the height requirement is just 30 inches. And don't forget about your platforms or any landings in your stairs, because if they're 4 feet or more above the lower level, they also need a guardrail. And those are the basics for an OSHA guardrail. If you have any other thoughts or questions about guardrail, then please leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.